Hello there everyone, and welcome back to the Last Jedi videos, the video series where I try to wrap up what exactly happened with the backlash against The Last Jedi on YouTube in a nice little bow, segmented into individual entries looking at the content of specific YouTubers who participated in the backlash. The purpose of the series is only secondarily to analyze the film where necessary to make specific points, and instead is primarily to understand the nature of specific objections so many large figures in the YouTube film content space made, and the logic or rationale that motivates them. I can't say it's particularly relevant whether The Last Jedi is a good film or a bad film overall, because on the one hand, if the film is bad but their stated reasons for making negative content about it are poor, that's suspicious. On the other hand, if the film is good and they overproduce negative content about it, or if the film is bad and their reasons are good but the response is disproportionate, that's also worthy of study. We're coming to the point in this video series where we start to draw our conclusions, and I thought this would be a great time to talk about what makes someone a grifter. 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 We hear that word thrown around quite a lot in competitive internet discourses. I think it's overused, personally. To be a grifter, you need to be a few things. You need to be making money or getting a lot of attention, obviously. Preferably, you should be taking home quite a bit of dough. But it can't be made honestly, and it shouldn't be hard-won. The quote-unquote tough thing about being a grifter, I would imagine, is continuing to pretend, needing to keep the mask on. Other than that, it's characteristic of a career path that is looked down upon, not merely because people are jealous of your success, but because it's the easy path, and you're taking it disingenuously. Usually grifters are associated with tropes of con men like snake oil salesmen or shell game operators. On the internet, where you can make money telling people your views about media properties, there has emerged another type of grifter, the bad faith fandom grifter. When you accuse a content creator of being a grifter, you have to be careful. It's not that the word is so offensive that it shouldn't be invoked lightly, but rather if you demonstrate that you have a propensity to respond to discussions about grifting in content creator spaces in a way that removes the nuance of the term, some people might see that as a kind of admission, that if somebody applied the specific definition to your work or the creator of a work you're defending, they might be right, so instead you're using a deflection to dilute the term. If everyone's a grifter, no one is. The syndrome effect, you might call it. After all, we're all subject as content creators to more or less the same market forces. Instead, the best thing is to look at the facts of what someone is saying and what the context for those statements might be. Of all the content creators who jumped on the hate train around The Last Jedi on YouTube, the one who always springs to my mind when I think of a grifter is Jeremy Griggs of the channel Geeks Gamers. It's gotten to the point that I'm not even sure the other creators I've talked about would feel totally comfortable standing next to him as if they're directly comparable in their work, and I think that discomfort is epitomized in this now infamous clip of him talking on Nerdrotic's livestream show Friday Night Tights, courtesy of YouTuber Pop Counterculture.
Follow trends, although you literally say I just
created
trending before I make a video. Something I don't do.
I just created a One Piece discussion right now. I just created one for the past 5 minutes.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
I would have liked. Did we just talk about One Piece for 5 minutes? Yes or no?
We didn't.
Yes,
One Piece was used, but we didn't talk about it.
No.
Welcome to every video we make. We use one little thing and then we build the narrative out of it. Don't act like that's not what we do.
I don't build a narrative. I give
You're an
my
absolute
opinion.
fucking.
You are hard.
What we do. You've made the same fucking video on the same topic at least 7 times a week, Ryan. And you're gonna act like we don't do that.
I talk about I talk about
says one fucking thing and we make a whole video out of it. That's what we do. We don't do that.
Brie Larson, Brie is Brie is Brie Larson,
You've made the same fucking video on the same topic at least 7 times a week.
I get it, there are certain people that are going to just throw blanket claims out there to try to get attention.
We don't do that.
Brie Larson as Brie Larson as Brie Larson. Brie Larson after Brie Larson's Brie Larson. Brie Larson.
You've made the same fucking video on the same topic at least 7 times a week, Ryan.
Brie Larson.
I have never seen such a immature, whiny, little bitchy fan base in my life.
Brie Larson.
Jeremy, and I'll be calling him that just because it's a bit confusing to say Geeks and Gamers every time I mean him, has given the game away, but he was never particularly good at hiding it. The Last Jedi came out in December of 2017 and came to online streaming platforms in March of 2018. A few eagle-eyed viewers and fellow creators noticed that Jeremy seems to have flip-flopped every which way on how he talks about this film in terms of his personal feelings and its quality. Take a look at this clip from a now-missing video grabbed by Pop Counterculture and how it stands up to Jeremy's content almost exactly 1 year later.
Upon the release of The Last Jedi, Jeremy Griggs released a glowing review. It has since been taken down. This is the only surviving clip.
I love The Last Jedi, and I think it did a damn good job for being what it needed to be for Star Wars.
It's not that hard to figure out. I like The Last Jedi. I think I've made like 3 fucking reviews on it, and I'm still trying to figure out where I stand on this movie. But I'm a mess when it comes to this movie because I just can't figure out how I ultimately feel. But as I'm sitting here right now, I like The Last Jedi.
But Kyle Newman is basically saying people in the industry, the majority of the people in the industry that he knows, don't like The Last Jedi. It's not a good movie. And it's not a good movie. It's objectively not a good movie from a Star Wars standpoint. Now, if you want to argue that it's a good movie if you say it's a good movie outside of the Star Wars universe, I don't know. It's hard for me to judge that. I think that the movie is visually stunning. I think it has some beautiful shots, and I do think like Adam Driver's acting is really good in the movie. But that's neither here nor there. It's a Star Wars movie, and it's a bad Star Wars movie. It's an awful Star Wars movie for so many reasons. And so many people will not admit this publicly because they are scared to upset Disney.
It's an interesting thing watching Jeremy present his logic. There's a few fun points in there. First of all, the larger context of this video is the insinuation that most people secretly don't like this film, but are faking it, and even make disingenuous reviews to keep their Hollywood access. You can see how this kind of rhetoric was a big pleaser for all the Gamergate hangers-on. Jeremy also hits us with the classic, subjectively, this movie is objectively bad. I know that's not what he literally said, but let's turn on our brains for a second here. What does from a Star Wars standpoint mean in this context? Presumably, Jeremy is saying that Star Wars in general has certain qualities or conventions, and this film is straying from those. However, that is literally what it means to have a subjective standard. Relative to what we could theoretically agree are the conventional qualities of a Star Wars film, The Last Jedi is allegedly a big deviation. I'm not 100% sure I agree for reasons I've gone over before, but what's fascinating is how this act of deviation is itself rhetorically insinuated to be an inherent negative. Jeremy doesn't say the film is bad because it's different. He actually does something far more deceitful for a critic, which is attempting to code the very nature of a film's potential to be judged with good or bad qualities as containing that value judgment to a degree that he doesn't even need to say it. This is a strong argumentative strategy when used to affirm the audience's biases, because it means the question of whether a deviation is positive or negative operates primarily based on the audience's intuition. All of us make basic emotional judgments that precede our rational thoughts, but presumably, the function of rationality is to question the basis of those judgments. For Jeremy and for critics like him, the chief function of rationality is to rationalize those impulses, and it's not a good thing just because the two words sound similar. This psychological phenomenon is also often called sour grapes, but it's a deep function of human psychology. I said in a recent essay unrelated to film or YouTube or discourse that someone who is unable to ask a question is unable to know, and vice versa. A huge and powerful function of the critic is to speak the unspoken, and so I find critics like Jeremy to be a negative for the arts because the way they criticize actually pulls the veil back over the art by building certain ideas into their value judgments. If the standard is objective, it's unaccountable, or it's only accountable in a circular fashion that never establishes itself. Jeremy's description of why The Last Jedi is a bad Star Wars film is predicated on a similar kind of faulty reasoning. If The Last Jedi is a bad Star Wars film because there is some special frame of reference for judging Star Wars films, what is that frame of reference? It should presumably be a series of qualities related to the contents of the work of art. Which qualities should it have? Does it need all of them? Can it express them differently? Who decided that? Why can't it be different? Is it different? Before we move on, I'd also like to address the insinuation about positive reviews being traded for Hollywood access. In general, it is the case, to the best of my knowledge, that reviewers want their reviews published as close to release as possible, and therefore they often appreciate receiving advance copies of the things they review, which comes courtesy of the companies that make them or the companies which distribute them. If a critic is a brand risk, they probably won't receive an advance copy. That is what most people probably care about, and if negative reviews factor into that, I could understand believing there will be pressure. However, this pressure will exist generally, and it is only a question of whether a specific company which distributes advanced copies will behave in this way. So, we need an analogous example of a Disney Star Wars film which received negative critic reviews if we want to poke a massive hole in Jeremy's logic. Do you think we can find one? If you look to the Rotten Tomatoes page for The Last Jedi, you'll see the numbers that reflect Jeremy's narrative. The voice of the people, or so we're supposed to believe, is being heard, even while these critics quake in fear of the powers that be. It's more than a little cheesy, but that's the basic insinuation. It's why YouTubers like Jeremy are so obsessed with metascores, many of which are useless because they don't filter for who has or hasn't seen the film to begin with. However, if we take Jeremy at his word and treat those scores as representing that kind of people's reviewer revolution, we can see something extremely interesting just by looking at the Rotten Tomatoes page for The Rise of Skywalker. Critics hated this film. It was being torn to shreds for being a poorly put together, cringy parade of tortured writing from A to Z. Yet the audience score, the real fans as we've been told, clapped like seals for this lukewarm dog water. The audience review metascore for The Rise of Skywalker is actually higher than not only The Last Jedi, but also The Force Awakens, Solo, The Revenge of the Sith, The Attack of the Clones, and The Phantom Menace. Watching critics like Jeremy pretend these audience metascores are meaningful is like watching Twitter users pretend they're going to lead a people's revolution. It's just chintzy populist rhetoric, failing to disguise a weird private personal belief. The structure of the arguments of a critic like Jeremy Griggs would have us chasing incomplete leads to half-stated revelations all day. He doesn't seem to have a strong grasp on what, if anything, would make The Last Jedi a good or a bad film, or a good Star Wars film or a bad Star Wars film. He doesn't seem to have a good grasp on the thoughts of others generally. He was, however, quite consistent over the years in what he did choose to talk about.
Now here's the deal with The Last Jedi. I don't care if you like the movie. I don't care if you're defending the movie, as long as you're defending the movie for the right reasons and not the social justice reasons that it seems that the majority of The Last Jedi defenders and the sequel trilogy defenders defend this current version of Star Wars. That's what they seem to defend, is the social justice element, and they always fall back on the bullshit argument that the people that don't like it are intimidated by women, all that crap. If you have that argument, you are irrelevant to me. You mean absolutely nothing to me. I stepped on a pile of dog shit today that is worth more than your existence. So if you're making that argument, that's what you are to me. You mean absolutely nothing. You know, I continue to see them try to defend this movie by not actually talking about the movie. They love to talk about diversity. They love to talk about how shipping isn't a bad thing. They love to say that the people that don't like it are intimidated by women and minorities and non-straight white males, basically. But they don't talk about the movie. Like, they don't talk about the plots of the movie. They don't talk about the story arcs in the movie. They don't defend anything that actually happened in the movie. All they do is defend the SJW talking points. And then, when you try to question them, that's when they fall back on the standard NPC talking points of, you're a racist, you're intimidated by women, and then they start trying to play the victim when you come back at them after they call you names. Like, this is standard for them, and it's happening so much.
Depending on how sincere you interpret Jeremy as being, and I do genuinely think that should be in question at this point, you might consider that distaste for The Last Jedi alone is not enough to justify labeling someone as sexist or racist. I certainly feel that way. However, what I can't abide is bad faith argumentation. Jeremy constantly brought up misogyny and racially motivated ideals in his videos about The Last Jedi, ostensibly because he was an innocent critic giving his opinion, or, objective truth, about the film, and he was wrongfully slandered with those associations. However, a person who claims that and then goes on to spend his online career pushing bigotry or affirming the bigotry of his audience is acting in bad faith. So we have to ask, is Jeremy Griggs doing that or not?
This mentality of already shitting on the movie before it even comes out, just because someone wrote female in the title of a random article, shows just how much you let your bias breed your hate.
Let me be clear, because obviously with the people that don't like me will react to the headline, my thumbnail, and they're gonna be like, Jeremy doesn't like women, and he's...
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Now, I don't think you hate women per se. I just think you're either afraid of women, ignorant to sexism and misogyny that's existed throughout time, or you don't like the idea of women being empowered, or all of the above.
I've been recently watching a lot of anime, and anime has a lot of strong female characters that are respectable, and you like them.
You use anime as a good example of well-written female characters, even though anime as an industry is very male-dominated, just like Hollywood. Yes, there are the occasional strong female characters, but a lot of the time, the male characters completely overshadow the female characters, and the women are often used for fan service in order to appeal to male viewers. Even the badass female characters are often over-sexualized. Listen, Jeremy, you don't need to tell us. We all know why you like anime. But basically, for this next part, he talks about how he's not angry at the fact that they've cast Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but rather the reasons behind it. Essentially, Hollywood is compromising stories nowadays by saying that men are bad and women are good, even though that's not at all what's happening here. All they've done in this article is write female lead. Jeremy here gets pissed off at the word female. He says everything in this title is good except for the word female. And because of that word that has no actual impact on him, but it's actually quite cool to see for a lot of people, he suddenly hates this movie without even giving it a chance. Let me say that again. He'd be completely on board with this movie if the word female had been removed from this article, because apparently the word female means that he as a man is being discriminated against.
This one is kind of unique though. Like, I don't want to just cover every dumb thing that Geeks and Gamers ever says, but this is it's kind of special in a bad way. All right, so here is just a little segment from the Geeks and Gamers review on geeksandgamers.com. Prey follows Naru, a Comanche, that word, who is repeatedly told she's better than everyone else in her community, which doesn't happen at all.
No,
at everything except hunting. So she focuses on the one thing that she's not good at and derives her entire personality from this perceived failing, which is just, that is a take, man. But before we get into just the asinine nature of everything else, this word right here is a slur. And it's not just any old slur, it's actually a twofer. It covers, as I've got the definition here, the English word is an ethnic and sexual slur, historically used for indigenous North American women. Contemporary use of the term, especially by non-natives, is considered derogatory, misogynist, and racist. So they got misogyny and racism all in one, you know?
It's their new favorite word.
And here's the thing, though. I was willing to be like, okay, maybe they didn't know, because me and Jarbo talked about this. We remember reading that word in books from that we read in school.
It's in the Peter Pan Disney.
Okay. Yeah. So we knew we'd seen it. We had no idea it was a slur. So I could understand if they just thought it was a word you can use, and then they write it, and then people go, hey, you shouldn't say that word. And then any responsible, reasonable person would go, oh shit, thanks for pointing that out to me. That's not what they did. They doubled down. Editor's note. A staff member has brought to our attention that the term is considered a racist term for Native Americans in the modern day. It was used in this article in its historical context as a term for Native American women because the movie takes place in the 1700s, and we will not remove it.
You know, it just beats the hell out of me why anyone would think Jeremy has a problem with gender or racial minorities. It's a serious pattern in his content. But it also isn't unique. When you affirm people's bigoted biases, you're infinitely replaceable by anyone else who steps up to the plate to give your audience the basics. People aren't coming to you for your unique way of thinking or speaking. They aren't coming to you to learn. They're coming to you because you're predictable. How do I know this? Well, besides directly what we've seen so far that affirms the thesis of this video, that all of this childish argumentation orbits intuitive impulses which necessarily trend towards affirming hidden biases, Jeremy said it himself on a live stream. He used to give his takes on things, and now he does what people want to see, and he's found a profitable niche there. In conclusion, Jeremy Griggs is acting in bad faith. He affirms his audience's biases on purpose. He tells them what they want to hear even when it has no correlation with what he thinks, and he isn't alone. His behavior, sans honest admission, is profoundly common among other creators, and many of them accept him in relative terms because in accordance with their similarly cheaply gotten values orbiting the YouTube bucks that follow from giving people a pass on hate, they don't really care that much. I genuinely think that for people lost in this mindset, in this vortex of bad faith, this just becomes what it means to be an honest person. There's another group of people who share that exact quality: political conservatives. When many conservatives go online to present their ideals and argue with figures on the left, they frequently operate in total bad faith, disguising their ideals not just because consciously they understand they'll be judged, but because either consciously or unconsciously they know what having the advantage feels like. And presenting one face while secretly having another gives someone an argumentative advantage. It means you're in control. It also means, rather ironically, that it becomes convenient to assume bad faith into others. Think about how Jeremy gestures broadly at accusations of sexism and racism. He presents these allegations not as analytically unsound, which would require him to run through the logic of the critique, but as inherently implausible from the get-go. He behaves as if this is just something that will be done to you if you have the correct opinions, so you should just shrug it off. And while I appreciate wanting to shrug off spurious allegations, I don't think I appreciate avoiding introspection. There's a reason why accusations of virtue signaling come up in the content of creators like Shadiversity, for instance, who we discussed previously in this series, and who even appeared briefly in a clip quoted in this essay. It's the same reason why Jeremy and others fixate on audience review metascores, and the supposed pressure on reviewers of inside Hollywood perspectives that nobody wants to talk about. They need to present their stance as secretly already dominant. Everybody already agrees with us. They just won't admit it. We're a part of the silent majority. This is the ultimate bad faith argument, and it ties the bow on the reactionary propaganda being shoveled into the eyes and ears of audiences everywhere.